Brother Arif. Yeah, a transformation has taken place. MashaAllah. If you guys can hear, if you guys are receiving this, then please let us know in the comments. Inshallah. Hopefully the stream should be working. I don't see why there should be a problem. Hopefully, inshallah, the stream should be working. So so as we've got a normal presenter, Naveed by here. Naveed, give a shout out
Shout out.
to anyone you want. To the boys of Spark Hill.
No, this is a shout out to Papa Tahir. Assalamu alaikum.
Is he watching? Okay, and this is brother Arif, mashallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum
You
assalam.
nearly call me Altaf then.
Brother Altaf there, and so it's like 4 letters: Arif, Altaf, A, F. This is in between the I and the R and the.
The LT and the A. So it's a massive.
Oh, it's 5 letters, isn't it? Altaf. Oh yeah, right. So anyway, alhamdulillah, you guys can hear. Excellent. Right. So our topic today is a bit of a strange topic today. So our topic today is, as you can tell from the title, which is Muslims balancing wealth and deen. And we were actually, when we were thinking of this topic, we were thinking of so many different possibilities of what we could call this podcast today, right? So we had some extreme names, and we had some very mellowed down names. So I thought of one that kind of comes in the middle. And brother Arif is, mashallah, his area of expertise, or one of his area of expertise.
I was going to say one.
Yeah, one of the areas of expertise is the accountancy, right? So, mashallah, he's got a very good understanding of how accounts work and how businesses generally work. And this is why it's very important as Muslims that we seek the help, the consultation of people who are experts in their fields. So, you might, someone might come to me and say, Sheikh, where should I invest my money? Yeah, what do you think I should do with this? What do you think I should do with it? So, those kind of questions aren't questions which I can give you the best answer to. I can give you my own opinion. But to give you the best answer, you'd have to go to someone who obviously is familiar with how businesses work and accounts work and all that. And on top of that, Brother Arif is also Muslim as well, alhamdulillah. And he also has an understanding of how Islamic sort of concepts work and things that are prohibited in transactions. So that's why he'd have a very a balanced sort of like understanding of how a business in this country, how a business might be Islamically problematic. And sometimes what tends to happen is, we might sometimes think that as long as I am working, as long as I'm earning for my family, everything else is okay, and that might not be the case. Because sometimes you might be cutting corners, you might be doing certain things which are, morally wrong. Legally, they might be allowed according to the government rules, but it's like Islamically, they might be problematic. And at the same time, you have this issue, which is the idea of, as Muslims, I mean, this is like a question which I always get asked, and I've always been kind of like trying to grapple with this idea of, as a Muslim, we're always kind of like being reminded we're going to die one day. We're going to leave everything behind. This idea of, we should, Sheikh Zaid quotes this a lot, doesn't he? That, what was that? Was it Alexander? What was that famous when I die, Zulqarnain, when I die, put my hands outside my shroud. And they said, why? Because when people see that he came in this world with nothing, and he went from this word. Or am I just making this up? I might be making this up.
Harun Rashid?
I can't remember, I heard Sheikh Zaid say so many times.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, so
before we do go on, sorry, Arif, why don't you actually start by telling us about what you do? Because me and Mufti Saab obviously know you very well, but for the average Joe, what is it that you do on a day-to-day basis?
Before I continue, I must put a disclaimer. Brother Arif supports Manchester United. Yeah. So I don't know if the viewers, it might affect their viewing. You might want to like switch off, or whether you want to carry on. Yeah, record this maybe. Then that's totally up to you guys. Yeah.
As soon as he said Manchester United, I saw the numbers going up. It seems
Allah
like more
Akbar.
people are coming on. You see.
Allah.
Allah.
What is the latest with Manchester United?
Manchester United at the moment, they're bottom mid-table, but I mean, it's early season. But they beat PSG on Tuesday night, 2-1, who last season made the final of the Champions League. So it's inshallah, it can only get better. They were down to fourth from bottom at the start. So
Oh, well, it's the beginning of the season. Okay, tell me this then. You know that new thing that I've seen on the news, that Manchester United and Liverpool are in talks about some European Premiership.
Okay. That actually ties in nicely with your topic today, about finances and money. That is just a pure money thing.
Allahu Akbar.
Because
I'm not saying I'm a wali, guys. I'm not saying I'm a wali, yeah. But you know what I'm saying. Yeah, Nav, the way that Nav looked to the side and smiled. Yeah, that's like...
There's another word that came to mind.
Okay, so come on. Let's Nav, what were you saying to
I was asking Arif, obviously we know him quite well. For the people that don't actually know him, I think a nice way of putting it is, what fingers do you have your pies in at the moment, bro? What is it that you do on a day-to-day? What do you, like, what businesses do you might be running, etc., and how you make your money in general?
I've been running my own accountancy practice now for the last 24, 25 years. I've got very good client base. About everything from taxi drivers to law firms.
Okay, sorry, Arif, your sound. I don't know what's happening.
I can't.
Sound, brother Arif, your sound is slightly. I don't know why. Oh, mashallah, brother Altaf has joined us. Allah, with the 2 red lights on his headphones, like some sort of like robots.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Allah Akbar.
Arif, speak now, please, bro.
Okay. Yeah. So. Uh-oh.
That me again.
Okay. Yeah.
I think.
What
What have you changed?
Okay.
We're back to normal.
Is that okay now?
No.
No, it's not.
Okay, so. Better?
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. What did you do there? That was a strange thing.
See, I'm a man of many talents, Mustafa. I don't even know what I do half the time.
Allah.
Is that a random kind of like throw the dice and just all sorts of good things happen for you?
Just see what happens, alhamdulillah. And whatever happens, you just take it in your path.
Allah.
So, bro, you had an accountancy firm for 20 plus years.
Yeah, 20 plus years, own accountancy practice, got client base, alhamdulillah, good staff as well. We cover everything from taxi drivers to builders, law firms, insurance companies, literally the whole, supermarkets, and deal with the accounts. So the main thing that we do is obviously make sure that they comply with tax regulations and pay the right amount of taxes.
So let's ask the question then. What got you into accountancy? Because I remember, let me tell you something. When I was in college, someone said to me, don't go into accountancy because accountants, all they do all day is just smoke weed. Yeah, and I just think, why is that? Oh, I go, don't you know, accountants all day just play with numbers, and that's so boring that they have nothing else to do, that they just smoke pot all day. So I gave up on accountancy.
Believe it or not, I got into accountancy very freakily. I was actually about to start an insurance job, and a very well-known publicity came to my house on a Sunday evening. He wasn't aware that I was starting the job. He just came to see how it was and asked me, what are you doing? And I said, I'm starting the job tomorrow. He goes, where are you working for? I said, Lloyd's. And he goes, the bank? I went, no, the insurance company, Lloyd's. And then I got a lecture about the permissibility of the field I was going into. And alhamdulillah, being young, and I was like, should I, shouldn't I? and I didn't turn up to work the next day. It was my first day, and I didn't turn up. And at that point, I thought, well, what am I going to do? So I started studying accounts, and then I went into an accountancy field. I worked for somebody, and then I started my own practice from my front room, like most Asians do. And then, alhamdulillah, from there, we moved to offices. And we've only recently, about a year ago, moved to a bigger set of offices. But it is what you said earlier about numbers being boring. There is an element of boringness, but it's also like problem solving. Altaf's got a bit of a accountancy background. I can see the smile on his face when I say problem solving.
His pops, mashallah, is a very well-known accountant in Birmingham, mashallah, isn't he?
Alhamdulillah.
You know
Mashallah.
that point. I think the point that that Arif mentioned about the giving up for the sake of Allah. That is in itself, sometimes a choice that we have to make. Where in life, you have a situation where, you might be thinking that, what, I can go very far in this business. I can excel. I can be promoted. I can make so much. But then at the same time, it's like, but there's like this haram element to it. And then you think to yourself, I'll give this up. And, do you think that by you giving that up, Allah has, opened up more doors for you?
No,
Do you feel that?
Yeah, Musab, if I'm 48 years old now, and the way my life,
Allahu Akbar.
I know I look 28, but I'm 48, and I cannot be more grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way my life has planned out. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me an abundance, and sometimes you worries that all of this wealth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives, you try and make sure you utilize it in the correct way, because it's, in all honesty, nowadays it's so easy to like gather wealth, and because there's so many business opportunities out there. And
I like how you said the word gather. That's a very, I think that's a very like a kind of relevant word. The idea of gather, because the Quran actually mentions that. So I don't know if you're kind of like just randomly quoting Quran.
You did say it's one of my many times.
Jama'a malahu wa addada. Yeah, gathering is the idea. Is like one is earning and one is gathering, isn't it?
Mufti Sahib, that wasn't a mistake he made. These are just natural things that Arif comes out with, mashallah.
Coming from an old hand, that is. Yes, but the thing is, unfortunately, businesses now and money now, businessmen, it has become a form of gather. We have clients, obviously, without mentioning any names or anything like that. They could have, for example, like 50, 60,000 pounds, or even in excess of 100,000 pounds in the bank account, but they will still class themselves as poor and hard to do. Needing, I haven't got enough money saved up, and sometimes you just wonder, what are you actually saving up for? There's no guarantee of tomorrow, or there's no guarantee for the next hour. But everybody, and in the Asian business culture, we've got this thing where not only I have to be set up, but my life has to be comfortable, my life, their kids' life, and their kids' life. So you look at, it's almost trying to earn enough money to assist 4 generations.
Sorry, your sound is
Has it gone?
I'm not sure why.
Okay, video input, video resolution, advanced settings. Okay, stereo. Is that any better?
No, there is this crackling in there. It's like you're like eating like crisp or something. It sounds like you're eating popcorn or crisps.
I'm on keto diet at the moment, so it's definitely not eating crisps.
MashaAllah.
So Altaf has a late night muncher. He's probably got pizza stashed away there. When his screen goes blank, he just goes in.
Alhamdulillah.
I
normally try to run away.
Try Arif, try logging.
Try logging.
Is there a facility to join on Zoom? Is there any way that people can
No,
directly
this
stream?
is on Zoom. This is on Zoom. Okay, so
Even though we suggested that it should be on Zoom, but chalo, who listens to us guys?
it used to be on Zoom
Asi
when
chote log.
you know in the
We
beginning.
never had sound issues then.
We had other problems. We had like a world of other problems. So okay, so Altaf, tell us about what your sort of thoughts are on this topic of today.
So I think it's one of those really interesting and different types of topics, because one of the things that you're seeing a lot more of is a different attitude that young people have towards wealth and the way that their ideas around wealth are forming. And when you look at the services that we have available to us nowadays as well, our relationship with purchasing and being really consumer like has kind of evolved and changed. So like the Amazon, we've become the children of Amazon almost, where we get instant gratification from purchasing. We don't actually feel like we're spending money. We're just pressing buttons. And we press a button, we can get credit. We press a button, we can start purchasing things. We press a button, and by the next day, the item's with us. So our relationship with money is completely changed, where it doesn't have like a physical value. It has a numerical value that we see in an app on a bank. And because people are like starting to invest in very different spaces. So I've got lots of friends. I've not been able to do this, and maybe this is something we can address on a podcast soon. Is I've got a lot of friends who are investing on like online apps, using like Bitcoin facilities and other kind of areas of trading. But when you look at how they trade money, it's really become a numerical value on their phone, and it's almost like pretend money. You're not actually feeling the cash anymore. So you just buy and spend as you go.
I think some people do have cash under their mattress still.
Well,
behind the fridge.
I know. I definitely know. Arif Bhai knows a lot of people who choose to operate in cash only.
I'm glad you actually said that Arif Bhai doesn't have cash under his mattress. I'm worried about somebody breaking in. If anybody's listening, I don't have any cash under the mattress.
He doesn't have cash under the mattress. His mattress is made of cash.
If anyone wants to leave cash under my mattress, then please, please do so.
It's called breaking and entering.
I think Altaf made a very good point about society nowadays. Literally because of using cards and phones to pay, and that they've made it so easy to purchase things. People actually don't have value for money. That value that you had, you earned the money, you were given a wage pack in a brown packet, you opened it up and you think I got 60, 70, 80 quid, and you were careful about where you spent it. Now it's kind of made so easy for you to buy something, and literally you can be buying. I was doing some online shopping, it was £80, the thing I was buying, and they actually gave me an option to pay in installments over 12 months. Now, it's making it easier for people who maybe don't have £80 to spend to be able to buy, and you end up just buying one thing, two things, and that's £8 each. Because the way you work it out is, I've got £8 a month, that's all I've got to pay. But you buy 6 or 7 things, now that's all of a sudden £48, £56 a month that you've got to pay. So you do lose that value and that almost that respect for money. Because it is just figures on your mobile app, on your mobile banking app, etc., and so on. You just go out and spend it. And for me, borrowing is made too easy, and it gets people into trouble. And you understand why Islamically, dealing in interest or borrowing, etc. Why it could start off as a small thing where you're only borrowing £50, £100. But inevitably that 100 becomes 200, 300, then you get a credit card to clear the balance of another credit card, and before you know it, you're £5,000, £10,000 in debt, and literally you're just working to pay off a debt.
Actually, the point that you mentioned about that you don't have the cash in your hand. Your first ever, this is for every question for everyone. Your first ever income that you had, your first earning, do you remember that?
Yep.
Yeah.
What did you buy?
So there's two different ones, Mustasab. One was I did the paper round for Jerry's on Fentham Road.
Oh.
And I earned 15 quid a week from him. And the second one was my first job at Villa Park, where I worked
Okay.
I worked in the warehouse and I printed the football t-shirts for footballers. And I used to get paid £3 an hour, minimum wage. And the first thing I spent my salary on, I think I gave it to my gran.
Okay.
So I gave her some money. I didn't give her all of it. Obviously, it's a bit of a greedy kid and probably got a haircut and a football top. Actually, I bought a tracksuit bottom from a guy that we all know.
Oh, all
He used to have a
right.
shop on Birchville Road.
We all know him.
He used to have a shop on Birchville Road, and now his shop has wheels and he goes everywhere.
Because he's around everywhere, yeah?
Yeah, I bought a great pair, Lecoq Sportive.
Was it
tracksuit bottom
original?
from him.
Oh,
Allah
God.
knows best whether the original or fake. So
Arif might know about that.
Please don't get me started on that side.
So, Naveed, what was, do you remember about your first income? What did you buy with it?
Okay, my first income was from my first job, which was when I was about 17. So I didn't do any paper and anything, but my first job was at a call center. So I was selling talk, I remember, and a bit like Altaf, first wage, I just gave it majority to my mom, and then I gave some as sadaqah.
Oh,
That was it. Not even trying to be pious, like I wasn't even practicing at that time, but it was just the go-to thing to do anyway. It was like a default position.
Arif, your mic is
On mic again.
is talking again. Yeah, so you know the first income that I got was I actually went to apply for paper round, you know on Putney Road.
You had to apply for paper round.
So yes,
So yes, I went to apply like application.
It's me again, I think.
Okay, so yeah,
Okay.
so Arif bhai, your
Mic, mashallah.
I don't actually blame Arif Bhai. I blame Mufti Sahib
Blame
for not
Mufti
going
Sahib
back to doing
for not going back to.
So you might have to, whatever you've done, you might have to undo it. So what I done was when I was
When I was 9 years old,
basically what happened was I had to I went to the shop, Putney Road. There used to be that on the corner. I don't know if it's still there or not. Next to that wine shop, alcohol off license. Yeah. And so
what?
yeah, again Arif bhai,
What's happening in WhatsApp
you might have to log back in.
Log back in.
again?
It might be better if you jump in the computer.
Might be better if you jump.
So what basically happened was I went to the corner shop and I was 9 years old and I was
Was it in Pakistan, by the way, or was it in
No,
this
no,
country?
this was on Putney
Just
Road.
checking.
So that shop is a famous shop because it always has a sign on the shop saying no more than 5 kids allowed in the shop at once. It's one of those kind of ones.
5, that's generous.
So because they used to nick stuff in it. They used to kind of
We had our
put
local
magazines
shop
under
there
their
too.
jumpers, grab sweets and put in the pockets.
so do you remember that shop by Halford Drive?
Which one?
You know when you're coming back from Halford Drive and you walk past where Eden School is now?
Oh yeah.
That shop, he was strict.
Yeah. I never went there that much.
Kasman, you like talking about
So
property.
listen, this is what happened.
Sure,
Let me tell you what
yeah.
happened in there. So I went in there and I said, I want a paper round. And the guy goes, how old are you? You're supposed to be 13. And I said, I'm 13. I was about to say, I was 9. And I was about to say to the guy, I'm 13. My brother said, no, he's 9 years old. He's 9 years old. And my first interview, right, I failed in my first interview. I lost that job. I would have got, I think it was about £10 a week. I would have got £10 a week. Yeah, but, taqdeer. Then the first job that I got was actually working in a restaurant. That was the first job I got. And I used to work 1 day a week. And I was about 16 years old then. And it was, I think, first of all, I got £15 a night. And then after that, it went up to about 20, then 25.
Were you a waiter?
Waiter, yeah. So it was an Indian restaurant. And it was like in Shrewsbury. Like you had to travel 1 hour there, 1 hour back. And, messed up your whole day, messed up your whole night. But yeah, I remember the guy gave me an envelope. Yeah, he gave everyone in the restaurant, he gave them like envelopes, and he gave me an envelope, and I was like, opened it, and he's like, that feeling you get when you think you found something, you found some money. Yeah. So what did I buy? I mean, I think I bought myself a top and trousers. I used to be in those days. I used to kind of save up money for designer stuff. Those are kind of jahiliya days. You know, in Jahiliyyah days when you
So
we
what's
used to go.
changed?
No, I don't have designer stuff, man. I just have normal, plain, you know,
Yeah,
Primark,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, Primark, or what's that? There's that chemist on Witton Road that sells clothes and they sell medicine as well.
Do you remember that guy, Musab? We were talking about him, the US brass guy,
Yeah, oh yeah,
the US brass guy on Witton Road. We were saying that because what's happened is, there's a clothing shop that does school uniforms. And
yeah.
a couple of the guys, what they've done is that the Broadway school, which is the school that we went to, you can get like a training top for Broadway school.
Okay.
And because nobody knows the Broadway school logo, they've all bought this training top. So Azim, Zakir, and all these guys, they've got like this Broadway school training top that they wear around everywhere. You can wear it to your meetings because it looks quite stylish. And if somebody says, "What school is it?" you could just pretend and say it's Broadway Grammar. And for those people that know, Broadway school is definitely not a grammar school.
You know this idea? I mean, this is interesting. Like this idea of people saving up money to buy like designer wear. I mean, when I used to go to buy like designer stuff, sometimes like a t-shirt would cost, 30, 40, 50 pound just for the label, the name. And you could get the exact same t-shirt in them days for like 15 pound, good quality one, 10 pound, 15 pound. You get a good quality one. And now when I look at it retrospectively, to me, it's like such a waste of money that, just to show the label of a clothing, now I don't see the point of it, but I know like youngsters, people in their late teens, early 20s are really into this kind of like, designer and the name. And, it was like sometimes when I used to kind of like buy stuff, I mean, now I know there's like some designers stuff out there that's really crazy expensive, like shoes that go into the thousands. Yeah. And like tops, jackets that go into the, the higher end of 1,000. But again, what you were saying earlier on, Altaf, about this idea of consumerism, I don't know, has this consumerism is this something which has affected people's taste in buying, in the sense that they want to go for designer stuff, rather show off to people of what they can buy, rather than
I think it's mixed. I think it's kind of become a bit of both. So like when you look at discounted clothes, like the famous case with Boohoo and other brands at the moment. These are like discounted brands that don't necessarily offer designer clothes, they just offer stylish clothes but for a cheaper price. And the quality seems to be less good as well, so they become more disposable. So people are getting through more clothes but they're getting through less quality.
You know what, sir? Trying to turn the echo off or echo on.
Okay.
So yeah, I think kind of like clothes have become more disposable and the way that people view those as well. So I think that's taking place. But I think what Arif Bhai's mentioned before as well around the fact that people are able to access debt very quickly. And you can be on a website like Amazon or any of these other famous websites. You can add something to your basket, not have the money, right? And by the end of the checkout process, you'll have already taken out credit. You'll have filled in a form. You'll be able to get this item at your house.
yeah.
And nobody would know the difference. Now you can do that with PayPal. You can kind of sign up for PayPal credit, and it's just like a few clicks. So it is literally kind of like that's the way that process works.
People buying unnecessarily lights and stuff, man. This time, falling on themselves.
Allah Akbar.
I've got it here in the corner actually.
Yeah. That was a stunt there, by the way. Yeah, he slipped his hand, made the light drop, and it was like this, the kind of right, guys. Noor, this is the.
That's actually a really good idea. Whoever suggested that. Arif bhai, you got any earphones or headphones or a headset or anything like that? That might reduce the noise.
Well, we can't hear you now. Your sound is totally gone. You have become
He's muted it because of the echo.
So
I think he needs a new phone.
You need a new phone, bro.
New iPhone's out next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, iPhone people, 12 whack phone.
Have you still got your brand new Samsung Ultra?
Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't want to encourage people to fall into consumerism.
You did show us it last
Allah.
week.
Arif, try logging off and logging back in. Maybe it'll reset. What I wanted to say was, when you mentioned about this idea of like people who buy online, with the COVID-19 and with people losing their jobs, and then people have taken out mortgages, they're losing their houses, and they can't continue their payments for. Sometimes when you think about it, when you kind of like when you talk to some people about how much they actually have invested in this kind of like credit schemes where you pay deferred payments, and they're actually just like scraping off their wages, like they're just hoping that they're going to get their wages for the next month so they can pay off all these subscriptions that they have, and all these kind of like
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a widespread thing in the Asian community, but like in the non-Muslim community I've seen it quite a lot.
Oh no, it's
In the non-
widespread everywhere, Mufti Sahib.
In the non-Muslim community, Mufti Saab, I remember a lot of my friends, what they used to do is when they first get paid, that first week they spend really, they'd splash out, buy everything that they wanted, go out on the weekend or whatnot. The second week, they'd just be a bit more reserved and, be normal, spend not excessively, but spend and not worry about finances too much. And in the last 2 weeks, Bechare, they were just like scraping the bottom of the tin, as they say.
You
So
know,
some people live like that.
Yeah.
can you
Well,
can you
Arif?
guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, bro.
I mean, Mufsad, one thing you mentioned there about people are literally paying now, and I would say it's 80 to 90% of people are earning just to be able to pay monthly payments, whether it's for a car, a mortgage, the TV, the furniture, literally everything people are getting on because they make it so easy for you to buy. You can go into somewhere like DFS and buy a £5,000 sofa suite, which you're paying for the name, but you're paying interest free over 4 years. And then you obviously can get a brand new car on lease, and then your house mortgage. They've made the consumerism has made it so easy for people to obtain things, and it's always upgrading from what you have. You may have a perfectly good phone, but like I heard Aldaf mention earlier, the iPhone 12 is coming out. Now people will go out who maybe can't afford an iPhone 12, but just get it on a monthly payment. So it's just added on and on and on. I mean, I've got one client who literally his monthly payments we calculated for him were £4,500 per month. He needs to earn just to be able to meet his monthly payments. It's ludicrous, but unfortunately, that's where society has become. And that person's a Muslim as well.
Do you kind of like advise? Do you feel sometimes you need to advise some of your clients about spending?
I always tell them, because people will come to me and, they'll ask, well, I want to get this car. The first question I'll ask is why, do you need it? And number two, can you afford it? I mean, I'm always, with most of my clients, I kind of like try and keep them away from the monthly payments. That's the advice I generally give. Purely because I think to myself, well, number one, you just buy, it's not a necessity what you want. It's literally a luxury, but you're going to be tying yourself in for a long period of time to pay for it.
So Arif, on that, based on that, like some people will say that never buy a depreciating asset. So if an asset goes down over a period of time, they say don't buy, lease it, and only purchase appreciating assets. So would you still stick that same rule as a Muslim, or would you suggest no, you should try to own the asset outright?
You see, even if you look at it, even if you lease a vehicle, the amount of money that you're going to lose at the end of the 3 years that you paid lease payments, it's going to be the same value, more or less same value of what you're going to lose if you actually purchase the asset outright. So when you actually do the calculations, I did a calculation very similar to that for somebody who was looking to buy a Range Rover Sport. And I think his lease payments were coming out about £800 a month with an initial payment of about 6 to 7 months. And when I calculated it for him, I said, look, if you do this average miles, we expect your vehicle to be worth this much after 5 years. And I think the difference was about £2,000-3,000. So I would look at it, I advise him, I said, look, are you not off then just purchasing it? Because number one, you're not dealing in interest. You're not going to have any interest payments to pay, etc., and so on. And you're going to have an asset or something to sell at the end of it, rather than after 5 years or 4 years just give the vehicle back. So I think the asset is very few assets can actually appreciate in value unless it's a Rolex watch or something like that you're buying. Generally, they go through price.
The sound is going down again. So I think I just like to ask something over here. For example, like Islamically, when people over here, Qasim's asked as well. He just said 4.5 a month. Okay, sound is. You might have to Arif, do your logout thing again and come back. Okay, so I mean the 4.5k a month depends on what he earns. Okay, that makes sense. Sounds like a lot, but if he's on millions or even hundreds of thousands, then it's all right. I think this brings up a very interesting question, which is in Islam we have this idea of extravagance, right? Overspending. So the question that comes to people's minds when they see someone, for example, driving a very high-end vehicle, or they live in a large house, the question comes is, can't they live in a house like other people? Like, can't they drive a car like an average car? Why do they have to buy a car which is close to the 100,000s? Does that make sense? So this idea, I think, of extravagance, spending too much, and being able to balance this understanding of Islamic sort of like understanding. Yeah, so I've seen people that come to me and said, Sheikh, I can afford this kind of a car, but does it fall under extravagance? So a lot of these kind of things do fall under. Yeah, the sound again. So a lot of these kind of things, might fall under extravagance. I mean, how would you guys? Okay. To make it a bit easier, how would you guys sort of like define what it means to overspend? Like, how much is overspending? Someone might have, let's say, 10k in their bank, and they want to buy the latest iPhone, right? So, is that going to be overspending for them?
Mustafa, I think what overspending is if you look at your worst case scenario. I heard the last bit of the comment about £4,500 a month. Even if you're earning £60,000-70,000 a year or £100,000 a year, the fact is you're in an agreement now for the next 5 or 6 years, and in mortgage terms for 20-25 years that you're going to be paying £4,500 a month. Now there's no guarantees in life apart from death, but the fact is you've got to look at it worst scenario. If my business was to suffer, will I still be able to maintain that payment? Now, my scenario would be, if I was advising a client, I would say, don't look at your best case scenario that I'm earning X amount of money and I'm going to be carrying on earning that. Look, if business took a downturn, how your business would suffer, and what kind of money are you going to be earning then? Then can you afford the payments? And if you can afford the payments, then that's fine. And if you can't at that time, then you're probably overstretching yourself. Because unfortunately, when people come to spend and borrow, they always look at the best case scenario. I'm going to be earning £100,000 a year. But in real terms, in business terms, businesses, especially now with COVID coming in, business is suffering. We've had clients close down who have had shops for 10, 15 years. They've had to close down because they're not making anything to be able to pay the rent. The government gave the grants initially, but the grants are only going to last for so long. When business suffers for such a long time, people suffer, businesses suffer.
I remember someone asked me a question. This was a question they asked, and that question basically was, this guy had purchased a house, and it was like a very high-end house, right? It was quite expensive, and so he purchased it on, I think it was like a Islamic mortgage, right? So the amount that he was paying was gonna cover it all in about 17 years, he said. About 21 years, he said. But it was a very expensive house, and what happened was he was earning roughly around about 150k a year. So he says, what's happened is he goes to me, can I transfer to a normal mortgage? And I said, what's happened? He goes, the job that I had, I'm earning less now. So I was thinking to myself, earning less. Like, how much less? He goes, now I'm only earning 70,000. So I was thinking to myself that this guy wants to adjust because he doesn't want to pay in 21 years. He wants to pay it off in 17 years. And he knows that if he goes into a conventional mortgage, the amount that he's going to have to pay is going to be much less. And he can pay it off in a shorter time. And I said to him, look, end of the day, you think to yourself, put your hand on your heart and ask yourself that do you really need to go to a normal mortgage in your situation? And, is it really worth compromising your religious values just for that? And then I said, that's all I can say to you. I can't advise you anything more than that. And he just said to me, look, Sheikh, I don't know what to do. Honestly, I just don't know what to do. And I said to him, look, if it's a matter of simply you wanting to pay off in 17 years rather than 21 years, I just stick to the Islamic one. Why do you have to go to this one for? So it's like some people see like this kind of like pressure of paying off debts to be a means to allow certain things which are unlawful in our religion to become lawful for them. Yeah.
Not only that, Mufti Saab, when it comes to paying tax and actually paying back the system, all of a sudden we become Darul Kufr, and then people all of a sudden find Islamically justified reasons of not to do certain things. I find that a lot amongst brothers with big dawah, practicing brothers, that just because it's got something to do with, well, they'll have to pay a bit more tax, or they can claim X, Y, and Z. They'll do that, and they'll say, "Nah, bro, I've been paying tax my whole life," and somewhat justify in their head. I don't get it. I'm sure Arif sees a lot of this, bro.
Yeah. And if you want to add anything?
Saying it's funny.
That sounded like a thank.
Your phone, mashallah, is your enemy today.
I don't think it's Fazul Kharch for Arif to buy a new phone. I'm not sure if it's an extravagant use of money to buy a new phone, bro.
Just talking about this idea of, like, do you guys ever feel guilty of spending too much on certain things? Do you guys like?
I'm probably the worst person to ask that. I never ever feel guilt.
I mean, you must feel like inside. You must sometimes think to yourself, should I really have paid for that? I could have, bought my kids something. I could have.
When you start thinking like that, Mufti Saab, me and Altaf had deep conversations about this, especially, obviously, I don't want to relate it to the charity sector in general, but because a lot of people use this excuse, especially when fundraising, and they try to emotionally blackmail you into giving. Once you stops, why did you spend £30? You could have given £30 to feed somebody. I was like, okay. But if I'm thinking like that, I might as well not do nothing. So I'm really against that kind of mindset. But one thing I'll definitely say, when you learn to distinguish between needs and wants, that's when you realize yourself, for you, what is excessive spending.
So explain.
I mean that sometimes, for instance, you'll buy things all the time. That's a given anyway. But you need to decide what things that you actually need, where you can't survive without, you as an individual, and what things that you want and you know that you can live without them. And it's different for everybody else. But living in that kind of, I think that's an unhealthy kind of mindset. I know you probably disagree with me there, Mufti Saab, where you're thinking that I shouldn't do this because I can do this. That's just like, I don't know,
It's
man.
a
It
false
just never ends.
equivalency. It feels
You know
like
what I
a
mean,
false
Altaf?
equivalency when because when what happens is people like they compare or they offset this versus that. I'm always
Yeah.
been of the opinion that if it's something that you want and something that you can afford,
Yeah.
fine. I think where you're overstretching yourself, I think that's where you have to think about it a little bit more. But I'm not probably the worst person to speak to about these kind of things because I would just be like, I'm quite consumeristic person when it comes to tech and stuff. So I will just buy if I see something that I like, I will make a way or find a way, not by
But is
borrowing
that
money, but to purchase
but is that
something.
because you'll buy it because it's something that's functional in your life? It'll give you more sort of like ease and sort of like facilitate for you your job or whatever your life.
But I think you can justify anything in Mufti Sahib. It's the level of comfort you want to be at.
Yeah.
It's like, like for instance, you could buy a MacBook, right? You might need a laptop or a computer. That's the need, right? So, and there's a whole range of options out there that you could pick, right? But then, you can justify to yourself why you're going to go for a certain option. And for some people that might make sense, and for other people that might not make sense. And sometimes you might be thinking to yourself, actually, when I buy a laptop, I also want to future-proof it so that it's good for the next few years. There's no point me buying a laptop that's old now that I'm going to have to replace. So there's a lot of things that go on in your mind.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
I'm
I
of
don't
that opinion that
that's something which I don't have an issue with. Like I buy stuff, right? So I will sometimes look for the best quality something because I know that instead of me buying something which is like refurbished or maybe that's been used several times, and then have that regular headache of having to fix it, especially when it comes to like a computer or something or like a phone, and it's like I'm the kind of guy who gets like really stressed if the car breaks down or something happens to the computer, because then I've got to think, oh, I've got to sort this out because if I don't do this, it's going to affect my work. So I don't have an issue with that. The problem is that how do you balance it with things like, sometimes you might go to, like, for me, it might be a situation where, okay, there's this nice restaurant, food's quite nice, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what, but I'll be paying 4 or 5 times more than what I might be paying at this place. Does that make sense? Now, this is my own sort of like personal, opinion, view on this, right? And there might be people out there who are very, very wealthy, very rich, and for them to eat at places where, per head you're paying like 100, 150, 200 pounds, it's nothing for them. Like they won't even think about it. And then someone else, like another Muslim, might be looking at that lifestyle and say that, you know what, why didn't they spend at least 50% of it on the poor in this country? Or, so you see, there's this kind of like imbalance in our community of how do we deal with richness. Like if you see someone rich, sometimes people will just badmouth them. And
They hold them to their standards and their own financial situation, which is really wrong. Because like, I'll give you an example. I've got a few friends that are worth, but because they're working like high level consultancy or whatnot, and they own a company, and certain times I know people who might disagree, but the reason why they drive a certain car is because they get taken seriously and they get it's like for that particular type of clientele or whatnot, they will entertain the tender for the contract if the person doesn't fit that persona. And rather than spending that money on something else, they'll buy a car. One, it's for their ease. Secondly, they can afford it. And thirdly, because it actually helps them in some capacity in the long run. It's not because they're showing off. But then somebody else might see this person driving this fancy car and think that, oh, no, he should have bought a Nissan Micra and given the rest of the money to charity. How does that make any sense?
But don't you think
sorry, go on, Arif.
Sorry, but don't you think a point that Mufti Saab made earlier on about people being judgmental? Do you not feel that judgmental element side of it is an element of jealousy? Because people trying to put somebody else down. Because I know many wealthy people who drive very big cars who give a lot of money in charity. Now I'm talking tens of thousands of pounds. And I've experienced it obviously when I've been doing chanda for various, or doing fundraisers, for various things.
One of Arif's texts, mashallah, going out. That's it.
I remember.
And people do give. So alhamdulillah, rather than kind of like say, oh, why is he driving this car? Why is he driving that car? I think that brother Naveed made it. It's a point. The fact is, he can afford to drive that car, and as long as he can afford to drive it without putting any strain on himself financially, then what would be? I would personally, I don't see anything wrong with that.
I think it's about judging people to the Sahaba standard, but not judging yourself to that standard. So you hear the story of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and then you look at that person and you think, wow, he could do so much more for charity. You don't look at your own life and think, I could cancel my Netflix subscription and give £10 a month to an orphan. That doesn't even
famous
come to your mind.
statement, isn't it? It's a famous statement that when it comes to the dunya, look at people below you. When it comes to your religion, you should look at people who are ahead. And I think that kind of like it's a self-monitoring sort of like a mechanism where whenever you look at people, like I remember when I was in Pakistan. When I was in Pakistan, I saw people literally on a monthly basis. They literally made, and this was many of my teachers were like this. They literally made 3,000 rupees. Right now, 3,000 rupees is what is it? You know, in them days it was like £30. Yeah, £20, £30. You got £20, £30. Someone's making a month, and then they have to do like several jobs. They have to teach in several places just to be able to survive. But they're surviving like it's like for them they can comfortably live like that without a problem. Now, when I was there, I remember in our madrasa we used to have like some students who were really wealthy. Like they were like so wealthy, like the father would buy anything for them, that kind of style. And you had some who like couldn't afford clothing. Like literally, there was one student. I'll give you an example. This guy was from he was from Mali. So this guy had one jubba only, one jubba, one izar, and every night he used to go after everyone went to sleep and he used to wash it himself. So what happened? One of the teachers found out that he's only got this one jubba, and this teacher's passed away now. So he called him, and then he like took some money out and he gave him the money, and then he told him to buy himself stuff. And it was like the people were shocked because they didn't know in the room there's a guy sleeping there who gets no funding from home and survives on like just really kind of peanuts. But it was like when you saw that kind of like the two classes there, you kind of like, because sometimes I used to go out with some of these guys, and these guys would like bring their chauffeur cars, and they'd go to like a high end restaurant, and then some of these guys who were very poor never ever could imagine that they'd ever go to such a restaurant, right? Where for us, I mean for England standards, it's kind of roughly the same price. You're paying like £15 per head, £10 per head, yeah. But for the people who are like poor, that's like a wages. That's like a month's wages for some of their parents. So it was like, like you were saying, Ataf was saying about this, like gauging ourselves with stories we hear about individual Sahaba. Because the reason I'm saying stories is because we don't tend to look at the entire life of a Sahabi. In fact, many of the Sahaba were actually rich near the end of their life. Right? They actually became like millionaires, some of them billionaires even in today's standards. Abdurrahman ibn Auf, he was an example of, he came penniless to Medina, penniless, literally, everything left behind. And then the Prophet ﷺ made him like brothers with Sa'd ibn Rabi. And then what happened was Sa'd ibn Rabi was very wealthy because the Prophet ﷺ, he knew who to make brothers with. So he makes him brothers with Sa'd ibn Rabi. And Sa'd ibn Rabi is a wealthy guy. And he says to him, look, I'll give you half my wealth and I've got 2 wives. You can take anyone you want. I'll divorce them. So he said, I don't need anything. All I need is just a small amount and I'll work. So it was like the guy understood the importance of, entrepreneurship. Is it entrepreneurship?
Entrepreneurial, what is it called?
Entrepreneurial.
Entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, like, those kind of guys on Facebook taking pictures with like top of the range cars, sports cars, saying, you could be like this as well. You can be like this in 5 years. You mean in 5 years I can take pictures with Lamborghinis and Ferraris?
Anybody that's on Amazon classes themselves as an entrepreneur these days.
But like I think it's become a lot more flexible in that people can start businesses very quickly now and can earn money very quickly. I think it's just the relationship we have.
Do you think so? Do you think that? Do you think that in the past it was easy as well? Because
Yes
I
and
think
no.
I think
No, because it's more difficult to source.
Yeah, but then it's like that.
But I'd say that
your
markets
source-
are less saturated, Altaf.
you got less sources, but at the same time, it's still the supply and demand. The supply and demand is still there. So I think the only difference today is that it's not become supply and demand. It's become advertise and fish them in. So it's like you're creating more people at consumerism, whereas in the past the idea of consumerism wasn't as large as it is today.
I think it's to do with access, Mufti Sahib, and the size of the market and like the power of the internet and things like that. Because even when we were younger, there wasn't just the number of items that we had access to or the availability of, whether it was through transport or supply chains or whatever else, right? We just didn't have that access. So I think it's a combination of both of them, that the supply has we've got more access to different items, and we can bring things to a market, and we've got the power and the tool of things like social media, which are really massive advertorial kind of places where we can attract business. So I think both of them come together, because sometimes on Amazon people are owning items. There's drop shipping where they don't own the item. They create the funnels, they make the sales, and it gets shipped directly from whatever country it's being sourced from, directly to the customer.
Yeah.
Moses,
So I
I've
think
got a
it's
question for you. Sorry.
combination.
Yeah. So maybe I think the advertising has become more sort of like specific surgical, where people
Yeah.
are specifically kind of targeting an audience and are able to target their. So I think yeah, you're right. I agree with that one. But okay, so let's go back to this issue. So Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, nothing. He's got nothing. First day, he takes a loan from Saad bin Rabi. He goes to the business, the market. He invests, he buys and sells, and he comes back with his first profit of the day. And what happens is Abdul Rahman bin Auf, he actually becomes a pioneer in some of the sort of like in the books of fiqh, some of the chapters of transactions. He actually becomes a pioneer in some of the models of business. So, for example, like the silent partner, he actually is the one that actually sort of like pushed this silent partner concept, where people would come to him and they'd say, you're a trustworthy person, you're a Sahabi, can we leave our wealth with you? And what he would basically do was he would take that wealth and say, listen, if I take this wealth as a trust, anything that happens to it, I'm not responsible. You know that, don't you? They said, what should we do then? He goes, rather, what you can do is borrow it to me as a loan. I can invest it. And then what I can do is I can give you a dividend. And you don't have to work anything. So you're the silent partner. So what happened was this became so popular for him. And he became so rich through this method. And other people became rich through him. That it kind of, it gave him this sort of like, what's the word for it? People had confidence in him, in their religion and in the dunya as well. Like he was a person that would go out of his way to make money for you, which is actually, if you think about it, which is one of the characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ, even before he was given the Quran. Like he was known for someone that would go out of his way to find a job for someone, like help them
What's
out.
up? Can I ask a question? You know that the story that you just gave of Abdul Rahman ibn Auf? When you're saying that he would go out to make money for others, would he be making money for himself at the same time?
Yeah. So he'd obviously get a share of the work that he's putting in.
No, it's just interesting that you framed it that he would make money for others, whereas the kind of like thing might be that he was actually just driving a really good mutually beneficial business where he would make money and they would make money.
And I mean that's plausible. But the way that it's kind of like if you frame it in the setting of a Sahabi, companion of the Prophet ﷺ, and that this is an individual who would always want to try and benefit the community as much as possible. Because if you, I mean, Altaf probably knows this, Naveed knows this probably. In a financial society, you always have to remember money has to flow amongst the people. The more you help other people invest and buy, just like what the government's trying to do now, with that eat out kind of thing. They wanted, business to flow and money to kind of circulate. Sahabas understood this, and that's what, zakat. Because I remember once I was giving a talk on zakat, and I mentioned, I said that, what should you do with your money? And people said, oh, give it all in charity. And I said, no, Islam doesn't say give all your money in charity. In fact, this is an interesting point. Imam Ghazali actually says you'll actually be counted sinful. He says you'll be counted sinful if you gave all your money in charity. And then the question is asked, but didn't Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu in that incident go home and bring everything that he had? He goes, yeah, he did, but other Sahaba didn't do that. And he done it because he was at such a state, he was in such a position with the Prophet ﷺ that the Prophet ﷺ, he knew that this would not affect his faith. His iman would not be affected. Like, you give all your charity to, let's say, for a particular cause today. Maybe in a week's time you regret it. Maybe in a week's time you start cursing yourself. Yeah, you're in a situation where you can't financially help your own family. So going back to what we were saying was that when it comes to this idea of spending Islamically, I said it's not charity. I said Islamically you are actually considered to be rewarded for spending as much as you like, but in a halal way, right? Don't be extravagant. Don't harm other people. don't buy things haram, you're actually rewarded for it. The more circulation there is. So I think, sometimes what tends to happen is, going back to this idea of listening to a lot of talks, a lot of the talks are designed to kind of make the dunya seem frowned upon. Like, after sitting in a spiritual talk, you tend to see the dunya as being something which it's just a natural thing that happens, a byproduct of every talk. Whenever you talk about the akhirah, the dunya will be belittled in your eyes. But the interesting thing about Abdul Rahman ibn Auf and Sahaba like Uthman al-Ghani and others is that they understood this balance. Like, for example, there was a particular Sahabi, and he was in Medina, and he was telling people this. He said, anyone who has any money for more than one day, 24 hours, he doesn't have trust in Allah. Yeah. So Uthman then pulled him to the side and said to him, look, listen, I can't let you stay in Medina anymore because you're causing fitna. He goes, look, if you can't have money for one day, what's the whole point of zakat when you have to have savings for 1 year? Why is there the concept of zakat, of savings of 1 year, when you're saying that you should have trust in Allah and you should basically live off whatever you earn in that day? You shouldn't worry about the other days. So it's like many of the Sahaba understood that long-term sort of financial planning and spending is something which is crucial to any person. But then the idea goes back to, how do you balance it with this spiritual sort of side?
I've got a question on the back of that. Sorry, Nav, you were saying something.
I was just going to say, one of the things that comes to mind when it comes to finances is the four Imams. Now, everybody knows that Imam Malik was financially stable, to say the least, yeah?
To the end of his life, near the end of his life.
Towards the end of his life, sorry. And he liked wearing like nice clothes, etc. And then obviously later, then you get someone like Imam Ahmad, and we know how much he struggled financially in the pursuit of seeking knowledge, to the point that he'd carry people's luggage in the desert basically to make money so he could go and study, etc. But you'd never catch like Imam Ahmad saying something bad about Imam Malik for having finances. And the same thing happens with the Sahaba. Like, I've never come across a narration or anything like that, Mufti Sahab, where somebody's spoken ill of a Sahabi that's financially more stable than somebody else. It just doesn't happen. Yet you see it a lot in this day and age.
Interesting. Someone's mentioned that the wealthiest students are the more hardworking. I don't necessarily agree with that, because Imam Abu Hanifa was actually born in a wealthy family. Right, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimullah, he's born in a wealthy family. And he actually is, one of the greatest imams in fiqh. But at the same time, he, explained chapters of finance transaction. So he understood Islamically what are the responsibilities upon a person when it comes to their financial dealings. And one day, Abu Hanifa rahimullah was teaching, and there was two students there. And the two students, they basically were like wearing disheveled clothes. And so after the lesson one day, what he done is he called them and he said, listen, here's some money. I've left some money under your mat where you sit. Have this, take it. And they turned around to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and they said, we're rich. We don't need this. So he goes, why are you wearing rags? He says, haven't you heard the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says, indeed, Allah loves to see the favor that he has bestowed upon you. So in other words, it's like what Allah gives you, the amount of earnings that you make, the amount of salary that you make, whatever Allah gives you, you shouldn't become in a state where you're not utilizing it properly. Spend it on yourself, buy yourself a car that's according to your standard, and buy yourself clothes and buy yourself food, all these kind of things. So it's like interesting how the Imams understood this idea. In fact, like this, what you mentioned about the Imam Malik one, recently on my social media, the social media team, they put up a post which was Imam Malik. He was so poor at one stage that he didn't have food for his family, so he decided to take down the beams of his roof, right, to sell them just to make some money to provide food for his family. So this was the state of Imam Malik at one stage. Yeah, and later on, Allah opened the doors for him, and Allah gave him so much. There's one of my teachers who recently passed away, Sheikh Abdul Halim Chisti. So one of my friends was telling that in his class he mentioned he became very emotional, started crying, and he said, there was a time, he goes, when India and Pakistan were together, he studied in Darul Uloom Deoband. He goes, there was a time when I went to class, me and my brother couldn't afford books. Like we couldn't afford them. And we would cry because we didn't have the money to buy the books. And he goes, but now Allah has bestowed so much that, those times over there, it's like we've totally forgotten them. And his brother and him are probably considered to be he's passed away now, but two of the world leading experts in the science of hadith, without doubt in the Indian subcontinent and even around the world. But if you see the kind of lifestyle, sometimes, you might see the lifestyle of a scholar and you want to be like him, but you don't understand the hardships that he went through. Yeah, he could have gone through loads of hardships in life to reach that stage, but you just want the kind of cream of the crop, the kind of fruit of everything. And then you might see a person who's quite wealthy, has a nice house and everything, and you feel envious of that person. But then you don't know what they went through in life to get to that stage. Yeah, how much hardships did they have to face? How many financial difficult decisions did they have to make? But then you just see this little window in their life. And I think that's what happens when we look at Sahaba. Is sometimes we look at a window in the life of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, we look at a window in the life of Umar, and we base the entirety of how we're supposed to, live our lives as Muslims just on that little sort of like incident that occurred.
Yeah, Musab, I think I was speaking with one of my friends about something that you mentioned, and I think you don't sometimes even have to look that far back. I think you can look at like your parents. Most of us are come from generations where our parents are kind of like, first, second generation families where they're just about making it. And when you think about the financial discussions or the considerations we have, and then you look back when you were younger and the considerations your parents would have when you were much younger, you kind of like start to put things into context that you never heard any of the stories or you never felt any of those experiences. But these would have been real conversations that they were having. Like our direct
They
debits for the month
shielded
are
you
probably
from
more
that.
than their salaries. Do you know what I mean? And that's something that we just wouldn't even put into perspective. I was just with one of my friends and we were just discussing that, like, and just talking about how we would never see that discussion. They would have shielded us from it, as Nav saying. But if we looked at the level of our spending or the level of our income compared to where most parents are coming from at that time when they were younger, we would see the difficulties that they would have gone through. Like they wouldn't have had all of these subscriptions that we have. They wouldn't have had this type of excessive spending around leased cars and houses and all of these kind of things. We didn't
Because
have
of
the
that,
desire
Alpha.
for access and stuff
Sorry
like
to
that.
interrupt you, bro. Sorry to interrupt you, bro. Because of what you're saying, yeah, bro, sometimes I feel embarrassed. If I buy something that's a bit costly, like if I buy a laptop, if I buy something that's like a gadget that costs a certain amount of money, I don't even tell my dad how much it costs because I don't want him to think like that. Because when they were probably our age, they didn't, even though money's gone up and down and the value of the money has changed, bro, but certain things I still feel a bit, reserved about discussing with my old man. It's not because I'm trying to hide my finances from it. It's just out of adab, if you know what I mean.
I think what's happening over here is because there's this sharp sort of like rise in the earnings. So you got two generations. You got this very like sharp contrast between the amount that the average sort of like 20-year-old now is earning, and in the 90s the amount in the 80s where parents were earning, right? You got this big contrast now. So it's like now the parents would have been working for so long to like, I remember, for example, sometimes when we were young, having chips was like a very rare thing. Fish and chips. Like doner kebab wasn't really out in them days, and then it came out later on. And it was like just having fish and chips, and like, you thought, yeah, you got this fish and chips. And now it's like you can go 3 times a day, 5 times a day to buy yourself fish and chips. And it just, doesn't really cost that much now.
Musab, when you said there was no doner meat, I was going to say there was no halal doner meat.
Yeah, those days when people used to go to McDonald's and eat.
Granada, for anybody who remembers. No, Musab, I think what you're saying is a fair point, because like you've got like lots of younger people that are coming through, that are like going through to university or doing apprenticeships or working longer and standing on the shoulder of their parents and their grandparents, and being given the opportunity to learn, educate themselves, not just through formal education, but kind of like through their experiences and hustle, and not have to worry about the basics because the basics were covered. because their
Yes.
parents covered the
So you're saying like
food,
they were
covered
in
all of those
survival.
elements.
In them days, it was more about survival, and nowadays it's more about just trying to keep up the status quo. And
Yeah, then it
And
was
there's
about
a
survival. Now it's about flourishing, innit?
yeah, and there was a level of sacrifice as well. Like what Altaf's saying, maybe your parents decided to wear their, rundown shoes for a month longer just so they could buy you a pair of Nike because
yeah,
you were that kid where everybody else's children were wearing Nike or something like that. Like I can see all of this happening when we were younger.
yeah.
Or
You know the other.
somebody's mentioned on the comments that Granada, la hawla wa la quwwata.
You know what that
Granada
is?
was.
That's a Maji. That's Maji. That is.
Oh, that's Maji.
Plain old
Granada
me.
was a chip shop based on in Aston on Witten Road.
Yeah, I remember
That
that.
was he was well ahead of the curve. You know, halal meat comes from New Zealand, innit?
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, he was telling us that his whole doner meat came from New Zealand at that stage. But the thing is, Nav, anybody who's eaten doner meat there has never found doner meat like that ever again. But
Oh
because
right, one of those ones.
you can only find it in New Zealand.
It tastes nice, so it can't be halal.
He was telling us in the 90s about New Zealand, which is
I don't want
which
to
is the funny
promote
story.
any. I'm not here to promote any business. Yeah, I went with Atiq to this place in Stoke-on-Trent. Best done I've had. Chrysopolis. Try it out. If you ever there.
Yeah. Well, what's your definition of a good doner? Is it the grease in there? Is it the spice in there? Is it the softness
They
of the
make the
meat?
doner themselves, Mufti Saab. So it tastes in between like a Turkish kind of kebab and doner meat. That's like the best doner, in my
You know
opinion,
the
anyway.
the best doner I've tasted is that German doner. That's the best one I've tasted.
We know we're silent because it's awful.
Sponsor us. Sponsor us.
The best one I've had, super kebab in London, where they make it themselves as well.
Yeah. That's quality, bro.
So they stack up the meat Mufti Saab on that big
Yeah.
skewer, and then they cook it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Anyway, I was saying about the spending and the earning and thing. Okay, let's look at this issue then. So when it comes to, for example, like nowadays, they say that someone who's earning, a businessman, even if he's earning millions, he still feels that he has to earn more, and that kind of fits in with the Prophet ﷺ's famous saying, where if the son of Adam had, 2 valleys of gold, he'd always want the third one. So this statement actually does not mean you should not want gold. This statement actually means it's just showing the nature of human beings. Human beings are by nature extremely sort of like competitive when it comes to earning, right? They want to earn. You can't turn the tap off basically of earning. It's just going to carry on and on and on. So you've got, for example, like now, if you know anyone who is earning in their millions or even a billionaire, you would know that all these people would have investments in things that are continuously providing an income, whether it's halal or haram. And people who are not earning, a lot, generally don't kind of think in that way. So those people, their business is like, you can't stop their business. You can't you can't halt it. Whereas someone who's earning in like, the thousands, then maybe they can put a cap on it and say, okay, you know what? I'm not going to earn anymore. I'm happy with this. I'm going to keep a certain amount for a rainy day, and the rest I'm just going to spend it on my family and other things, and whatever, small investments. So it's like, I think because of how things have changed in today's times as well, I think a lot of people tend to kind of look at billionaires, millionaires, and kind of look at them, in a very critical way, and kind of say, well, why are these people earning so much for? Can't they stop? Isn't like Bill Gates, I don't know, 120 billion or whatever he's worth? Isn't that
Mufti
enough?
Saab, people's goalposts constantly change. Say, for instance, someone is a millionaire, and then they've come across, or they've been introduced to a circle where people are multi-millionaires. They're gonna obviously strive to be like them, and not because they want the same what they've got. It's just they'll measure their success to that. They'll think that, to be truly successful, this is the position. I need to be this level of financially stable. And once they get to that, they might come across the billionaires, and then someone owns a yacht, someone owns this, someone owns that. It doesn't finish, and I don't think that's totally because of knowledge and greed in a sense. But I just believe that people's goalposts constantly change.
Yeah.
What they strive for.
It would be good if we could have had Arif on this, because Arif, I think he'd be able, because Arif,
Arif is gonna buy the yacht.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to call him. Yeah, and I'm going to try to do it over call because I don't know. Let's just try that.
Just as a
Because
side point, somebody in the comments mentioned like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and talked about kind of like how that might be relevant. Just to kind of like flag up that I know it's a theory that most people use, but it was actually based on animals. So it's not really the greatest thing to kind of start from. I think if you want to look at something that a motivation theory, look at Adam's law of equity or theory of equity.
Do you know some
So I'll
Muslims, they read books like 48 Laws of Power and they think that this is Qaidan. I have to be like some malicious businessman. That's the only way I'm going to be successful.
Yeah.
Do you think,
all right, guys. So I've got Arif on loudspeaker. Yeah. So
Assalamu
Arif,
alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Everyone.
Wa alaikum salam.
Are we still talking about finances?
We moved on to talk about Granada's dynamite.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
Granada's dynamite.
you're saying Granada's dynamite. Remember Granada chip shop?
That's where you're talking earlier on about where you spent your first wages from. I bought my first doner kebab from there.
Halal doner kebab, eh?
It's now a Desi Roti Junction. We went through quite a few owners. Still there though, still up and running.
Alhamdulillah. Can you guys hear?
Yeah, we can hear him.
Yep.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Yeah, so Arif, we were just talking about this, this idea of, let's say, for example, like, we have different classes of people of how much they earn. And clearly, generally the sort of like normal practice is people who are earning a very high salary or very high income or earnings, they kind of like hang around together, yeah?
Yeah.
So when it comes to people who have like these big businesses and you look at someone who is, for example, not earning as much as them, their wages are, in the thousands only. Then they kind of like become very sort of like pessimistic and skeptical about these kind of individuals and say, as a Muslim, how comes these guys can't just survive on £10 million? How comes they can't just survive on... What are your thoughts on this?
In all honesty, Musab, it depends on how that £10 million is actually derived at. Because a lot of people who have a lot of wealth, they're just very good businessmen. So what you'll find is that they, every minute of their life is not necessarily devoted to business. They're just very good at what they do and they earn a lot of money, which I don't see that as a problem. Where I see the problem is when somebody's working day and night and his pure aim is just to get, to have bucket loads of money or a 6-figure or a 7-figure bank balance where everything else, all other morals and ethics just totally go out the window. That is more of an issue when if somebody is just very good at a business or a consultant or he's come up with an idea and he's come into wealth on the back of some hard work, then what would be wrong with that? I would personally, I don't see an issue in that, and I think it's having that balance in your life where it isn't all about just earning money. Unfortunately, I think now, and it's a sign of societies, people are judged by the wealth that they have. I mean, I can give you my own example. I mean, I come from a very humble background. My father, there were 6 brothers and sisters, and just my father working, so just normal working class family, etc. So alhamdulillah, went into business, accountancy practice picked off. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been very good to me financially in a decent position. But it's not the end all and be all for me to be in a financial position, but I see how people perceive me now and the way they speak to me now is a lot different to when I was up and coming in business. So it's almost people create these monsters by the way they speak to them and the way, for want of a better word, the way they almost suck up to them, which then kind of inflates the ego.
100%.
And you start believing your own kind of, I am something. Why? Because I've got X amount of money or whatever. For me, I don't agree with that because at the end of the day, person shouldn't be judged by his wealth or the car he drives. But that's what society does now. Where do you live? First, majority of the time, people, where do you live? If you live in Solihull or if you live in Aston, you perceive totally differently.
Yeah, I think.
So who's to actually be blamed for that? The individual himself with the wealth, or the people who are actually asking those questions?
Yeah, I mean the other thing is like perceptions that people have when it comes to things like I mean, obviously, this is just a very stereotype kind of thing that sometimes you might hear. That this individual is rich, so that means naturally he's gonna kind of look down upon us, or he's gonna be arrogant, or how comes he doesn't do much good? So that you said that there are so many wealthy people that that actually give in charity so much. So what's your kind of like experience in that side when it comes to people and their morals and their...
I think, to be honest with you, it actually, a lot of it depends on what's the person's grounding and where they've actually come from. What I tend to find is people who have kind of like come from a humble start and they've made business. Generally, what you find is those kind of people don't always forget, and they're quite down to earth, still, even though with the wealth. But when you've got people who have kind of like been born into it and don't know anything else, all they know is the luxury lifestyle because their father was wealthy, etc., and so on. So they've never been grounded, so they don't have that value for money. But what you find is somebody who's actually worked hard for his money, in a business venture, etc., and so on. What you find is with them, they tend to be a bit more grounded. I don't think it's fair to say most people kind of with a lot of wealth do tend to look down on people. There's an element of that, but then there's an element of good and bad in wealthy people, not so wealthy people, and everything. I think that's more so down to the individual's upbringing and what his grinding is, rather than to do with his wealth. And what you'll find is also one of the things that was almost up is if you are wealthy, you do tend to get a lot of people who want to actually borrow money from you.
Yeah.
So you kind of become, because literally every other conversation is, I need to borrow, can I borrow this? Can I? And sometimes, it can be 5, 10, 20, 30,000, large amounts of money. And people then do tend to borrow it. And then you kind of get to, everybody's always after something from me. So you become a bit reclusive. So it may come across as what they're doing is looking down on people, but they're probably just keeping themselves to themselves because they're just tired of being asked to borrow money.
I think that's a very sort of like a valid point. It's perspective, isn't it? It's like because a lot of people have not kind of rubbed shoulders with certain classes of people, they don't really kind of understand where these people are coming from. I mean, a good example is like I know a few people who are quite wealthy. And, they say to me, like, whenever there's a charity organization and they're doing like this kind of fundraiser, the number of times I get phone calls, the number of charity events I'm invited to. And it's like sometimes they feel embarrassed if they don't go.
Also, there's a list of people that you would like go to attack if you work in the charity sector. There's like, the Muslim community is not big. And the amount of people that are wealthy within a certain location, everybody knows who they are. And so
sorry to interrupt you, bro. Tell them how it is. Every charity has a high net donor list.
Yeah, everybody's got that list. Everybody's got a list of people. Whether it's GDPR compliant or not is a different question, and there's a list that exists. It's not a physical list. It might not be a physical list, but it's like an acknowledgement or an understanding of who's made it. We don't have many people like emerging that come into that level. So like, can you imagine the brothers from Euro garages or Walmart? So they bought Asda back into the UK. The two brothers from Blackburn paid, I think, was it 4.6 billion?
Something crazy, bro. Yeah.
Something, I can't remember the exact figure, but they paid a crazy amount of money to bring Asda back into UK ownership.
You
Right,
know,
these are
something that, I remember I was reading an article on this, when the two brothers, when they bought and someone in the comments, I remember on social media said, "Oh, mashallah, these guys are so good. They spend so much on mosques and madrasas." And when I read that, I thought, mashallah, okay. But then in my mind, I was thinking, is that the measure of how you measure goodness? That they spend on mosques and madrasas? Like, is that how you measure a wealthy person being good or not? And you don't know, I mean, they could be spending on orphans, they could be spending on their society. Them having a business themselves and providing jobs for people, isn't that a good thing itself? It's like sometimes we tend to forget. Like, remember the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where a man is walking and he sees a branch and he moves it out of the way. And the Prophet ﷺ said he's going to go Jannah, Allah's going to forgive him. So it's like he didn't even do something which we normally perceive as being like a good deed. He just moved a branch out of the way. So it's like, if there's a businessman and he's a CEO of a company and he's got, staff, he's providing income for them. He's providing funding. All of this comes under, doing something for the sake of Allah as well. Because if your intention is obviously to provide, a good business, that also comes under something good. But what tends to happen is certain people will only acknowledge someone's good deeds if it falls under particular categories.
So Mustafa, I'm going to tell you this funny story. I was reading a... Sorry, Arif, carry on.
Yeah, sorry, Musa. Unfortunately, the measuring tool has become wealth. People are measured by wealth rather than deeds. Like you say, good actions. Good actions aren't necessarily always about how much money you give, but other good actions that you may be doing, etc., and so on. But society has, and the consumer culture has made it such that you are judged by the car you drive, the house you live in, the clothes you wear, the watch you've got on, and things like that. And people think, well, okay, he's good. And you see, giving money towards a masjid or giving masjid towards a building, that's visible. People see that, but they don't, like you say, if they're sponsoring an orphan, or they're looking after somebody's household, or they've even helped somebody pay off a mortgage, nobody knows about that apart from the two individuals, so it doesn't come in the limelight. So therefore, they're never judged for that. But when somebody is wealthy, how do we know that they're not doing all of this stuff?
Definitely.
And it's so easy, the amount of times I've heard people who, prior to becoming wealthy through business, have said, oh, if I had this money, I would do this, I would do that. And I've seen those same individuals come into money, and I've not seen any of the actions that they've said that they would do, them actually do. So, retrospectively, it's quite easy to say, oh, if I was in that position, I would, kind of say, if I would give 50% of my income towards Deen, or, towards the work of Deen, etc., and so on. But when you don't have it, it's very easy to say it. But when you've actually got it, to part with it, it becomes very, very difficult.
On that point,
Arif,
Yeah, go on, Taf.
On that point, Arif, there's a story which came out recently. So when the National Lottery first started, back in the mid-90s, the first jackpot winner of a massive rollover was a Muslim guy from Blackburn.
Yeah, I remember that.
I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, it was Indian, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was Indian. From Blackburn. I can't remember his name, but I was reading an article about him recently. And it was a really confusing article because the community that he was from had rejected him because, one, he had won lottery money. But the other reason that they rejected him is because before he bought the ticket, the person that gave him the money, so he was owed money for his rent from his tenant. So his tenant gave him the rent. He said he was going to buy a lottery ticket. So his tenant said, oh, yeah, if you win, then we should go half and half on it. And he said, yeah, we'll go half and half on it. Obviously, he won £17 million in it. So he won £17 million, and he turned back on sharing the money. So the article is very confusing. It didn't say that the community had only gone against him because he won haram money, but they'd also gone against him because he didn't share his winnings with the guy that he was supposed to share them with. And so what Arif was talking about was quite interesting there. But this money also tore apart his family. And so he was, he was pushed away by his community. Family came out of nowhere asking for money. Then what happened is his marriage breaks down, and he's really lost himself and lost his identity as well. And then he ends up dying dying alone, as they say, almost, without kind of like that network and that community and that family around him. But it was interesting that one, couldn't get let go of the money because he promised somebody 50%. The second part of it was the fact that money isn't the sole source of happiness to everything as well. And some people, they look at money as being a solution sometimes.
I think some people are saying there's an echo in Altaf. I think some people are saying there's an echo in your. I don't know.
Mufti Saab, can I ask you a question? Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
There's a quote that I came across. I thought it was really profound. I don't know who actually quoted it. Maybe you might be able to help. They say that if money is in your hand and not in your heart, it won't damage you even if it's a lot. But if money is in your heart and not in your hand, it'll destroy you even if it's very little. Have you come across this quote before?
Yeah, something similar. You know, with these kind of quotes, what you have to remember, there's a place and a time for every quote. Yeah, there's a context
this is not the place.
behind. No, I'm saying there's a context behind every quote.
Yeah.
In the sense that sometimes when we quote something, we kind of assume this is how we're supposed to live our lives. And like I said to you, whenever we read the lives of the Sahaba, it's always the kind of juicy parts of their lives that we kind of hear quite frequently.
Sensationalized.
So when it comes to things like, for example, wealth, you know, the best quotes you're going to always hear about wealth is things like, the dunya is going to finish one day, and you know, death reminds you that, you know, nothing's worth anything. You're going to leave this world empty-handed. Those are the kind of quotes that really kind of become spiritual to people. And like I said to you, we need that. We need this balance. We need to be reminded, you know, one day we're going to leave everything behind. But that doesn't mean that the earning is wrong. Now, if someone says, for example, like, if you've got dunya in your heart, and what was the other one? In your hand.
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember from the top.
Hand. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean a person has love of the dunya? Then you ask the question, what does it mean to love the dunya? Like, if you've got like a very high-end car or a high-end house, does that mean you love the dunya? Like, are you going to measure people's love? Because you can't do that, because there were many Sahaba who were literally multimillionaires, billionaires, you know, and we know Sahaba were people who understood the balance of dunya. And even the Sahaba said this, you know, in fact, let me tell you, you know, when Umar radiallahu anhu went to Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, when he went to visit him in Sham, and he saw his house and he began to cry. And Abu Ubaidah said, what's wrong, Amir al-Mu'mineen? Umar radiallahu anhu said, the dunya has changed all of us except for you. So the Sahaba knew that dunya has a natural way of having like a negative impact on human beings. You can't help it, right? You know, you are going to change definitely. But then there's that like continuous effort you have to make to, you know, strike the balance. So we always talking about this balance. It's like a continuous effort you have to make to understand, okay, I'm earning this much. Am I doing anything wrong? You know, should there be anything? Clearly, you should be able to, you know, sort of like, monitor yourself. I think people should be able to monitor themselves.
Mufti Sahib, is there any link in living in poverty and was it aestheticism? I can't even pronounce the word properly. And zuhud and you know, aestheticism.
You know, in fact, this is a very important thing, because you know that someone asked earlier on about the poor students are the ones that always work the hardest. I disagree with that, because I've seen poor students and you know they get up to bad stuff, right? And they might not even be interested in studying. What I've seen as well is, and I read this in hadith as well, is that the Prophet ﷺ said extreme poverty can lead to kufr. So it's like wealth. Islamically, if you think about the Quran, you can possibly say there is a large, maybe 10% of the Quran talks about wealth. Whether it's to do with inheritance distribution, whether it's to do with, you know, the booty of war, whether it's to do with spending on your family, zakat. It's like 5 to 10% of the Quran is about this idea of spend. And it's so intrinsic to the Quran. So it's like when you're living in your life, you know, you think to yourself, okay, I'm earning, dunya is going to have a negative impact on me and I can't help that, right? But I can try to adjust certain things in my life. Yeah, I think that is the most important thing that Muslims need to understand. It's like
Musab,
understanding.
I think the other thing that you mentioned, which is quite interesting, is that you're mentioning that the Sahaba had a real understanding, a really deep understanding of the nature of life and the cycle that has. And I'm not just talking about like nature as in environmental, but also in terms of like monetary, and all the other things that take place within the natural world, as it grow as it develops. And is that something that we're really missing, is an appreciation of how Islam sits within that?
I definitely think that what seems to have happened today with what Arif was mentioning about the consumerism, and this kind of thing. I think this is like a new sort of like what was it called? A new sort of like problem that the world is facing at the moment. Yeah, a new fitna, a new test for the world. There's in Spain, in Muslim Spain, they used to deal in gold and silver coins. So what happened was when the Christians took over, this is written in a book by a guy called Murray Brown. So he says when the Christians took over in Spain, there was a king, and what he done was he took in all the gold coins and he shaved a little bit of the gold off, yeah, of every gold coin. And then what used to happen? The next king that used to come, he just started doing the same, and the next king that started to come, and it was like the guy. This was a non-Muslim who actually wrote this book on. It's called the secrets, the mysteries of banking. And in that book, he actually says the interesting thing is the Muslims, like the value of the gold and the coins in a Muslim society had remained constant for centuries. But all of a sudden, when these new invaders came and they took over and they began to do this kind of like dubious shavings, he goes, the value of the coins dropped. So it's like you have in the society clearly people who are gonna abuse this with wealth and power are two things that always abuse are tools that our people abuse. But again, going back to what you were saying about the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, I think we have to study the lives of the Sahaba thoroughly if you really want to kind of judge yourself or compare yourself with Sahaba and how you're supposed to live. You have to look at this, because if you just take, for example, like Mus'ab ibn Umair came from a wealthy family, sacrificed everything for Islam, dies, he doesn't have enough cloth to cover his head. If he covers his head, the feet show. Covers his feet, the head show. And the same with a guy called Sahabi called Dhul Bijadain, came from a wealthy family, accepts Islam, sacrifices everything, and is left with 2 pieces of cloth. He dies one night, and the 3 people that bury him were the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and Umar radiallahu anhu. Right, so if you think about that, there were clearly amazing people amongst the Sahaba who sacrificed everything. But like I quoted to you about Imam Ghazali, who says that anyone who spends all their wealth in the path of Allah, this person will actually be sinful, because they're not spiritually prepared for it. Right, the impulsive spending in the path of Allah is also something which is frowned upon by many scholars. So it's like I think it's a very difficult topic to be able to cover in one podcast about this idea of balance, because there's so many variables. What do you think, Arif?
I think a couple of points that came to my mind. I mean, obviously, when you look at Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu, when Rasulullah stood up and asked before a battle, for who was going to give in the path of Allah, and Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu kept giving. Now, he obviously had the wealth to be able to keep giving. So it's not having the wealth is not the issue. It's how you actually have got the wealth. Is that in a halal manner or a haram manner? Have you done it the right way? If Muslims now were, didn't concentrate on, trying to build their businesses and having wealth, for argument's sake, if there's a famine or there's a need in Syria, Yemen, or wherever across the world, if people don't have wealth, how can they assist these people? Yes, you can assist them with your du'as, but you need money to be able to buy the food and the aid to send to these people. So for me, the amount of wealth we have isn't the issue. It's how you've come to that wealth. And, just a bit about that, with all these government grants going on, unfortunately, I'm getting Muslims and non-Muslims ringing up about these bounce back loans that the bank are offering, which are interest free. And people are saying, look, I want to take the loan out, but I don't want to pay back. For me, morally, Islamically, that's wrong, because you've got a government who's trying to assist you in building your business, and you want to take the money and just fleece it and have no intention of actually paying that money back. So,
yeah. So do you see a lot of sort of like Muslims trying to cheat the system?
Unfortunately, Musa, it isn't a monopoly just by Muslims. I think there's a lot of people trying to cheat the system. Unfortunately, I think the bottom line is it depends on which side of the system you fall and what your personal situation is at that time. It depends on what your opinion on a certain matter is going to be. And an example of that is, if you've got somebody who's working in a full-time job, he will say, oh, no, you must pay all your taxes, you must do this, you must do that, your national insurance, look at, we get free hospitals, we get free education, and, all these self-employed people who don't pay the right amount of taxes, they're committing haram. And I've heard people use words as they're committing haram and they shouldn't be doing this. But then that same person loses his job and then, say, for argument's sake, becomes a taxi driver, and his view now is, well, no, I should be paying some tax into the system, but, let's try and keep it to an absolute bare minimum by even bending the rules. So, who's right, who's wrong? One day one person's saying one thing and his circumstances change, and all of a sudden his opinion about something changes as well. You find, I find a lot of that, hence why I always say, look, just don't be judgmental about anybody else's situation, because tomorrow you may be put in that situation. You may do the exact same thing. If you feel that person is doing wrong or whatever, make dua for him.
I think, if I can just mention, I think it's the problem with armchair critics. Armchair critics, usually they kind of like discuss things about politics in a different country. They have no expertise in, they have no experience in. The same thing with regards to people who are in a situation where they are wealthy. And Maji's actually mentioned a good comment. As long as you attain it and spend it in a halal manner, that's the key. Realize it's means, not the goal. I think that's also on point as well with what we're talking about. The other thing I just wanted to mention was, someone came to Imam Muhammad rahimahullah, who's a famous student of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and he said to him, how come you haven't written a book on zuhud? Right? How come you haven't written a book on this, being ascetic? So he said, I have. And they go, where? He goes, on all the chapters regarding trade, part of zuhud. That's a very interesting point he's saying, because what he was alluding towards was, it's through the trade that your piety really shows. Like, you can stand in front of Allah in the musalla, right? And you can stand as still as possible and read as beautiful as possible. But that doesn't show your piety. Like, salat will never show your piety. What will show your piety is when you're buying something from someone, are you willing to cheat that person? Are you willing to give up your morals in Islam for this? So if you know the rules in Islam and you think, what, I can bend this or I can do this, you might be able to do it with the government, right? But when it comes to Allah, it's like a totally different question here. So again, this brings another issue into this whole sort of like, soup of, how do you deal with the dunya? How do you deal with Deen? How do you deal with this rich sort of like community? And one last thing I'll mention is, remember that hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says that the poor people came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, the rich people have surpassed us. They give so much sadaqah, they can spend so much. We can't do that. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said to them, well, say this dhikr, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. And whoever says this the most will go Jannah, 500 years before. So they went, and then they came back later and they said, the rich people have learned this as well now. So now the rich people have wealth. And then the Prophet ﷺ just said, ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ. That's just the virtue of Allah. If Allah wants to give someone wealth, open doors for them when it comes to this wealth. It doesn't mean Allah loves that person. Nor does it mean that Allah dislikes that person. This is just something part of how the world works. But the point I want to show in this hadith is, the interesting part is, the people who were poor and the people who were rich were not considered to be any less than the other. Yeah, and I think the Prophet ﷺ showing this to the Sahaba was like, look, you got to get used to this idea that you might not be rich, or you got to get used to this idea you might not get the same opportunities as someone else. There could be someone who is father's a multimillionaire, and because they've got this advantage and this, this supply of money, they can live a lifestyle and they can invest in things that the average poor person has no means, like Altaf was mentioning in the beginning, like the difference between in the past opportunities entrepreneurs had, and in today's times, it's like there seems to be more so opportunity. Altaf, anything to say about that?
What's up? No, no, I think you nailed it with that comment, because I think it is about striking that balance. And I think one of the things that's stuck out to me in this podcast is about how the Sahaba understood the natural kind of the natural way life flows. So when you're talking about finances and other things, that these are just things that we don't control and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives, but it's neither negative or positive. It's just a means, and everybody has that same opportunity to strive towards Allah. And I think the kind of that balance of it, that part of it, sorry, not the balance, that part of it is really important and something that we often overlook. And I think it sounds, from when you describe the Sahaba and you hear about how the Sahaba are described by certain scholars, it sounds as if that they were very at peace with the way that life works and the different opportunities people would get, and they were able to frame their faith within that, whereas we struggle completely with that. Like, we struggle to understand different concepts of wealth, what is too much excessive spending.
What do you think the reason? I think this is a question for everyone. What do you think the reason is that we have this sort of like this kind of like a dystopia of when it comes to people not understanding how to like deal with rich people, poor people situation, earnings, balancing, your morals and ethics when it comes to all these things? What do you think the reason is? This is a question for everyone. Everyone can.
So I think for me, it's the Sahaba's life, when it's explained by scholars, especially in talks, because they're only giving you a snapshot, and that's all sometimes you're going to pick up and learn, and you're going to frame your whole religion on some of these things. I think it's about showing how the Sahaba were very pragmatic in their understanding of the religion. So that whole question of Abdurrahman ibn Auf, when you were framing it, Mufti Sahib, and you're saying that he was doing it for the benefit of the community, balancing that and saying that, well, he did earn the money for himself as well at the same time, and just showing that both sides of that, and giving people that comfort in it. Because what people see is that if it's for the benefit of the community, then they feel like everything has to be for the benefit of the community, because they don't see that you can have a self-interest in it. And so it's about balancing that the self-interest is to achieve the happiness of Allah, the pleasure of Allah through helping others, but there's also like a mutual benefit there that takes place for the individual themselves. And I think just balance that, just in that one example, for me, it was kind of like just being able to balance that and saying to people that are quite entrepreneurial, there's nothing wrong with your entrepreneurial spirit. Actually, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think you got some good points there. Nav, anything? Because we're going to finish in a bit.
I think Altaf hit the nail on the head. I think one thing that we really need to realize as well, that one aspect of wealth might not be like wealth in general, because I'm sure even the Oxford definition is going to differ with what I'm about to say, but I think part of wealth is contentment. And I think the reason why we probably don't know how to deal with other people's finances, and there might be an element of jealousy, is because sometimes we're so hell bent on and focused on things that we don't have and somebody else has, that we forget about all the blessings that Allah has given us. And most of our family back home and stuff like that are still living in poverty. So we often look at X, Y, and Z, and all the people at Ascot or whatnot, and think, why is my life not like that? And not realizing that, wait, hold up a minute, I'm still statistically even better off than most of the people in the world.
Yeah, I think that's a good
charity worker response on it.
It's a good way to kind of like look at these things. So yeah, so okay, I think we'll wrap it up with that. Someone here, Usman R, is saying, disagree with Arif. I think in general many businesses are looking to cut corners. Yeah, I mean it's kind of like difficult to kind of, I mean, I don't think it's right to kind of point fingers at all businesses. I think there's a lot of Muslims who are trying their best to try and earn halal. And it's always going to be a challenge. I think earning halal is always going to be a challenge because you are going to come across situations where, you know, there's that kind of like whisper that you get in your head, or situation that you're in, you know, dire need or whatever.
I think the thing that Usman was saying is, I agree with some of it, like how people might be shocked, but to be honest, right, accounting practices go across the board in terms of how people offshore money, how people, you know, have hidden money, how big corporations don't pay their taxes, because they're able to use, you know, lacunas or whatever gaps they find within financial law. So I think it's a balance. I think, you know, in the microcosm of the Muslim community, it does definitely exist in terms of people trying to cut corners. You know, you see that when you go to restaurants and they don't accept cards, and on occasions you're like, we know why you don't accept card. You know, so you do see that on multiple occasions, and there's no doubt that that does happen. But to kind of like, I think, frame it within just that one area I think is wrong. I think kind of like, for me, it's a massive issue. Like when you look at Google and Amazon and how much tax they pay because they've got really good lawyers, just because it falls within the legality of the law doesn't mean it's within the spirit of the law. So I think there's a balance there.
Anyway, I think alhamdulillah, I think it was a good, interesting podcast with Brother Arif coming in and out. Yeah.
I don't know why, during like the last few minutes, I've just been thinking about this really old song. Paisa mila, aisa mila, ab kharidunga bangla gari.
Never heard that one before. What
Anyway.
century is that? What?
That's from a different way.
Maji saying classic chip shop cards are haram.
I think I need to go bedtime now.
All right, guys. Jazakallah khair, guys, for watching. And hopefully, inshallah, see you guys next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.